LeBron James reportedly searching for a new home, or at least thinking about what comes next post-Lakers. Is this just LeBron being LeBron, or could the Suns actually swoop in and have a role to play here? We'll talk about it on today's episode of Locked On Suns.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And we're back. This is Locked On Phoenix Suns. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, and I'm your host, Brendon Kleen, a credentialed media member covering the Suns for the past 6 seasons, a writer at Suns.com, and the host of the Just Basketball Show wherever you get your podcast. Thank you for making Locked On Suns your first listen to close out your week. Happy Friday, maybe late Thursday, depending on when and where you are finding us. Hit follow, hit subscribe, wherever that is. Get this show in your feed every single Monday through Friday. Become an everydayer. Get all the news and analysis you need on your favorite team each and every day. You can also drop a comment down in the YouTube section or follow along at Locked On PHX Suns on Twitter to engage with the show, engage with listeners of the show, get updates when new shows go up, and all the rest. Tell me what you think about if LeBron would ever see Los Angeles East, I don't know what we call Phoenix, as a realistic destination. We're going to hit that here to start the show. Aaron Edwards is joining as he does every single week. Aaron, I want to throw the LeBron thing your way just because it is the talk of the NBA right now. And last summer, even, Suns fans were getting a little intrigued by the idea. First, today's show, guys, brought to you by the Gametime app. Create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA when you download to get $20 off your first purchase. That's last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed with Gametime. Okay, so here's the deal. I want to not take this LeBron thing any more seriously than we have to, Aaron. The reason I'm even entertaining the idea is, one, we already saw Chris Paul treat Phoenix as like a second home when his family is in Los Angeles. And that is a thing people do, and especially athletes. So there's one part of it. The other part of it is, if the NBA's taught us anything, is that if some superstar wants something to happen, it's at least going to be entertained by both sides. So with those caveats there, I'm not sitting here saying that this is going to happen or any sort of thing. I just want to talk it through. What are your thoughts on if LeBron leaves or thinks about leaving this summer, even next summer, even the summer after that, that the Suns should at least keep an eye on the situation?
Okay, so first of all, you calling Phoenix Los Angeles East, our mentions are about to be a disaster. You did that, that's on you. All you LA people go after Brandon, that's on him.
Nobody from LA listens to this show.
But that's on you. I didn't say that. I would never say that. Please stay away from me, LA people. Second, you're making me do this, and the only thing I'll add, the only way this would happen is how petty is LeBron? That's what I come down to. If Matt Ishbia, he hasn't talked with him, and if this is strictly to just put one in the face of David Griffin, or not David Griffin, what's the owner of the Cavs?
Dan Gilbert.
Dan Gilbert. And if it's just to screw him over and just be like, hey, I got your boy. He came here willingly. And just, if it's strictly just owner pettiness, LeBron pettiness, and just doing it just to do it, I can see LeBron kind of doing that. He's way pettier than we give him credit for. And that's the only route. I don't think it's to be in Phoenix, to have his son's going to be playing at USC. He doesn't want to go any further than he has to. He lives in the city that his son's going to be playing college basketball at. And I think he really wants to be there for those games. And I said even earlier that I could see him kind of holding off on his foot surgery and waiting a little bit longer to come back just to see some USC games and be around there. And LA's not going to be mad at him for not sitting on the sideline sometimes. It's LeBron. He can get away with a lot of stuff other people can't. So I can see him just kind of being in a boot and just being at a USC game every once in a while because
pulling
he's just
a Scottie Pippen.
Yeah, I can see him doing that because he wants to watch his son play college basketball, and I think coming to Phoenix is just not going to help that part that he wants to do, especially, and like, and I think the only way he would really do that is if he wants to be petty against Dan Gilbert more than he wants to see his son play basketball.
I had not considered the Dan Gilbert Matt Ishbia beef angle of all of this. I don't. Let me put it to you this way. That's an interesting way to put it. Would Phoenix be more or less of an interesting destination for somebody in LeBron's shoes than, let's say, going home to Cleveland or any of these other pathways that we could see the final years of his career taking? Because as he ages, and if he ever were to leave the Lakers, it would be because he truly just wanted one more championship and was trying to find a situation that was, like, on the one part, not so like humbling, where it's like he's not going to ring chase like he's, Karl Malone on the Lakers, but also somewhere where, he doesn't have to do the heavy lifting. Like, he's going to have to find that sweet spot. Cleveland, I actually think, isn't out of the question. So maybe there is a little bit of pettiness that Matt Ishbia might be able to drum up within him. But how do you think of the Suns compared to some of those other options? Because I think it's realistic that the Lakers may not see the Lakers as that, depending on how they handle the next couple of off seasons. He might have one last destination in him.
To me, LeBron has an added pressure just every season that starts to get to the finals or make a deep playoff run and at least just, like, not win a ring, but, like, there be a chance, like, that you can win a ring. And I think he's, like, in LA, like, he's kind of done pretty well with the pressure that comes with LA. All those teams haven't been great, so he's just kind of just been able to stay every once in a while. This team's trash. Like, I put on another LeBron season, but we don't got it. They did a deep run, and they were underdogs this last season, and that, like, works well for him. Like, it wasn't, like, the added pressure to, like, make the finals, even though some people did pick them. He hasn't had the playing with KD and Devin Booker type pressure in a long time. Like, he's kind of had an out the last couple of seasons because those teams really haven't been great. Like, they picked up Russ.
Does that say LeBron can't handle the pressure take from you? Is that where we're headed?
I'm just saying, like, to join a team like this that would be considered a super team again as a 39-year-old and then just have, like, the added LeBron plus the finals pressure and all that stuff, there's no point. Like, there is really, it's a lose-lose or, like, a really big lose and a kind of win for him. Like, it just doesn't, the ends don't justify the means. Yes, he wins the ring, and it's with KD and Devin Booker and Chris Paul. Like, nobody's gonna care. They're not gonna respect that. But if he doesn't, it's LeBron lost with KD, Devin Booker, and Chris Paul. Like, there's no reason to do that.
I'm not sure he's ever cared about does anyone count that, though? Because, like, I guess maybe he beat out the super team hate a little bit, or, like, he created the super team hate, so he gets to sort of slide past it in a way.
And he got rid of it in 2016. Like, he sealed the deal.
Exactly.
Like, he doesn't have to do that anymore. But, like, he did, like, the reason he did that is because, like, all right, I beat one of the greatest teams of all time. I came down from 3-1, and I got back in you guys' good graces after going to Miami and kind of breaking basketball a little bit.
Yeah.
And to do that again, even if it's as a 39-year-old, like, I think that it would be backtracking to, like, such a weird degree after he's already earned the respect of everybody back. Like, he didn't even need to do that, honestly.
No, but, like, the other ring I was going to say that people try to invalidate from him is 2020, and he just was like, that was actually way harder than any of you guys realize. I won't hear anything else other on the opposite argument, and that was that. And, like, he just never engaged with it again. And I feel like you mentioned how LeBron has sort of risen above the pressure of being in Los Angeles. I just don't think any of that stuff hits off of him, or at least he'll never allow it to show that it does publicly. So I'm not sure how he would feel, but I do think that's one of the last kind of pieces of that, right? It's like you mentioned the pettiness of Dan Gilbert, which I know we're kind of joking about, but I do think where he's not going to go to the Oklahoma City Thunder. Like, there are only so many teams he's really going to consider going to, even if his goal is to play with Bronny. All of that behind the scenes stuff is going to happen before draft night that day ever hits, right? Like, we're going to know all of that ahead of time, and there's only going to be so many destinations. But I think on top of all of that, and then, being in LA this year to watch him, being in wherever he ends up getting drafted in the future. The last part really is, does he want to win a ring? And like I felt like the retirement stuff is all one thing, but to me, the 40, 10, and 9, and or whatever it was, 49 and 9, whatever, and playing all 48 minutes the way that he did, I think he knew they were going to lose that series, and I think he didn't really care about winning that game, because if he cared about winning that game, he wouldn't have played so much, because he wasn't even taking shots in that fourth quarter, outside of the last couple possessions, and then one of them got blocked. So to me, that was him saying, like, I still have it. Like, it was a reminder game more so than it was like I'm trying to put this team on my back and we're going to take this to 7 and win it. I don't think anyone thought that, but he did that on purpose. So I think that was a little bit of a reminder to everybody of, hey, I can still be a great player on a championship team. We'll have more time to talk if this even gets close to reality. I just wanted to check in on it.
Another part is, like, LeBron's camp isn't, like, tight-lipped, like, at all. So if he was even considering something like that, then, like, yeah, like, when it comes to teams that he could potentially go to, it's not one of those tight-lipped things. Like, when he left Cleveland, everybody knew he was going to LA. It was, like, one of the worst secrets in the league that he wanted to go to LA, and he wanted to do the production company stuff, and he wanted his kids to be out there, like, and even, like, the Miami thing, like, it was kind of, he leaned toward Miami, like, the day before, sort of. So it was, so, like, his camp, like, isn't, like, one of those, like, tight-lipped ships. Like, the only thing that was kind of shocking was him being like, maybe I'm not coming back next year. But everybody called bull on that immediately. And maybe it was just kind of like a move to get LA to do something, because nobody really thinks LeBron's not going to play next season. Nike won't allow that to happen. They're like,
let me ask you this then. So the way that I've been trying to think of it, and give me your 15-second answer. Do you feel like it's more likely that LeBron retires or is on a different team next year?
On a different team.
Okay. So, well, then that justifies us at least talking about it, because if that's at least the second most likely scenario after staying with the Lakers, which I think everybody agrees is probably number one, well, then it's number two, and I think we're in agreement that Phoenix is at least one of the places that he could think about. So maybe it's a 0.001% chance, but it is what people are talking about, and I think Suns fans, even dating back to last year when they knew that there was going to be some splashes made and this was the end of the line with Chris and whatever this core was going to be, it's even more so that way now. It's at least worth keeping in the back of our minds. Let's talk about the Suns head coaching search and another aging one last chance member of the NBA legendary status group, which is Doc Rivers, and whether that would be the worst thing the Suns have ever done, one of the worst, how much rioting there would be in the streets of downtown Phoenix if and when that ever happened. First, today's show brought to you all by the Gametime app, the official ticketing partner of the Locked On Podcast Network, and my hookup for baseball tickets this June in San Diego. Not exactly the only person that's going to be traveling to San Diego this summer. They also have a very good team that has a lot of hype around it, and tickets are a little harder to come by than they used to be even 2 years ago when I was last there, and we just kind of slid right into some nice seats day of. That's not going to be the case anymore, but Gametime had me hooked up. It's the fastest growing ticketing app in the country for a reason. You can get images of your seat before you buy, so you know what that San Diego skyline is going to look like from your seats, what your angle of the plate might be, how much of the field you're actually going to be able to see, all that good stuff. You can buy tickets in a matter of seconds, just 2 taps and you're set. Tickets are then sent directly to your phone, so you never have to dig through your email when you're at the gate and trying to get in quickly and the security guard is breathing down your neck and all the rest. Snag the tickets without the stress with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA to get $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, Aaron, so let's talk about Doc Rivers. How real do you think the consideration of Doc Rivers is? Because we went from it's going to be Ty Lue or Kevin Young, basically. And then it was like, all right, there's some of these other assistant coaches they're talking about. Then Gambo says, okay, maybe Nick Nurse. Then all of a sudden Frank Vogel's name gets thrown around. Then all of a sudden Doc Rivers' name gets thrown around, and now these finalists, all 5 of them, are kind of a hodgepodge of all those different rumors that we heard. Vogel, Rivers, Nurse, Jordy Fernandez, and Kevin Young, apparently all finalists. I talked about my thoughts on how real and what the point of all of that leakage was this week, but from the Doc standpoint, do you think it's legit? Do you think that they are actually strongly considering hiring Doc Rivers to be the next head coach?
No. And strictly because Matt Ishbia's a billionaire, and that stuff is kind of comes down to math and money and all that stuff. And just mathematically, how you would sell or market or do anything, it goes against pretty much everything billionaires believe in. And it's a dude that's failed over and over for years now, and it's Doc Rivers. He's done the same thing over and over, and I think that it just goes against everything that those dudes traditionally believe in. I think Morey just kind of thinks, he's just so cocky to the point to where he thinks he can achieve anything with anyone, even though they kind of haven't really achieved anything. They were fun in Houston, and that's really all it was to a point. But I think that would just go against everything that Matt Ishbia has shown that he's willing to do. He'd rather hire a dude from college or a dude that he probably thinks has potential. Billionaires go off of potential stuff a lot, but if you show who you are already, what's the point? That just doesn't make sense.
So that's interesting, because I was kind of thinking of it as, it seemed to me, and you could, Jake Fisher had a little bit on this, and it's been sort of a little bit one layer beneath the surface on some of the reporting around Rivers, is that it actually is Ishbia's guy. That's who he, the only reason they're talking to him is because Ishbia liked the sound of it or the thought of it. But I think you're probably right. This is the dude who announced a new TV deal for the team that apparently wasn't fully legal before it was allowed to be announced, and now the press release where he's hyping it up is being used as a court document as they hash out their agreement with the company that's in bankruptcy, because everybody just seemed to have jumped the gun. So, you're probably right to say that this guy would rather be the dude to hire, a Spanish guy that is part of the, best story in the league in Sacramento this year, than to hire the guy who has flamed out in epic fashion a bunch over the years. But if it's not Ishbia, I don't understand why Doc Rivers' name came up at all here.
I just don't know how you were out on Monty even kind of before you got here when it comes to people that have flamed out. And he hasn't even flamed out to the degree of Doc. To meet Monty and been like, I'm not really into this guy. He flamed out last year. And then we flamed out this year. Wow, I wasn't really into that either. He's gone. And then to go to Doc Rivers after that, it's less than a lateral move. It's below a lateral move. And I just don't see how that would make any sense.
That's exactly the reason that I haven't really taken it all that seriously. And to be honest, similar with Vogel, you're talking about two guys who have a similar, if not, you could make the case, worse track record than what Monty has had. And so I don't really know. Then that's why I think you're seeing such frustration from fans, is as much as people were out on Monty in Phoenix, which they obviously were, it's well, you can't hire somebody who you have to make a significant, detailed argument in order to even convince fans that he's better than the guy you just fired. And I think that's part of what is always so confusing to me about how teams in the NBA like to play it so safe with these guys, is it's so much easier to make the case to your fan base or whoever, to your players even, that hey, this is the new hotshot guy. He's coming from a great organization and he's going to be the missing piece for us, versus, hey, this is the dude who got made fun of for a month again this summer, and he's our dude. Sign up on his Calendly meeting website and meet with him this week. How are you supposed to look anybody in that room in the eye and say, we got rid of one guy who did this and now we're going to bring in another one? So my big question on this then, I guess, to wrap us up on this point is, with those finalists, people heard my thoughts yesterday, but where would you go? Where would you be leaning out of those 5 names that apparently are the finalists, even though we might not take all of them super seriously? Where do you think this goes? Who would you want?
I think the tough part is more than, like, we know more about coaches and philosophies and what they're going to bring to teams, like, more than ever before. I think that's tough for GMs. That's tough for owners. So, like, yeah, like, you're going to have to get a dude that we like and who we respect. Like, Budenholzer won a championship 2 years ago, and we're like, no, that's other Monty. He barely beat our Monty, and he's pretty, like, he had to have a player go all world to beat our team, and they were going to fire him before. And you rarely see that of a championship coach that a fan base is kind of out even before he's even mentioned. So I think, like, a lot of people want somebody fresh and younger and that they haven't really seen before.
So Kevin Young?
Yeah, I'm obviously talking about Kevin Young.
Yeah, Jordy Fernandez is interesting. I think he should get a shot. I think I'm a little bit, and I really don't mean this in any sort of, like, xenophobic way. I just think the fact that you're doing some of this the first time around, we saw this up close and personal with Phoenix, with Igor Kokoshkov, and it's like that, and David Blatt was another example. Like, there is an adjustment period. There is a learning curve that has to happen there for a head coach, even though Jordy Fernandez has been around. English is not an issue for that guy. I don't mean for it to come off that way, but to take such a big step to say we're going to hire the first of this type of coach, it'd be the same with Becky Hammon. As much as those people all deserve roles, it's hard to say, hey, come in and win a championship in year 1. And that's the expectation for whoever takes this job. And so that's part of why Fernandez or whoever other people like him, people who are trailblazers in some regard, are a little bit risky to me, having him come from Spain and be the first coach from that part of the world and all that stuff. The thing on Kevin Young that came out today at The Athletic from Bob Young, that is not the person who writes about the Suns at The Athletic anymore. That would be Doug Haller. A good quote from Billy Lang, who coached with Young in Philly. He said he understands the NBA is a players' league and above that, a superstars' league. At least from an offensive standpoint, he's going to be creative to whatever the person's unique skill sets are. His philosophy will be built around their skill sets, not the other way around. And at the same point, he'll make sure that what he has is appropriate for the rest of the team. And I think that should be music to Suns fans' ears. I think Doug is people should go read this because he was onto something that if I still wrote anything, I would have done this piece, and I've actually been digging around a little bit myself trying to get in touch with some of these. He has a very interesting path, so I'll read that piece, but that part in particular I think was really awesome, and I do feel like we're headed there. I mean, Bill Simmons came out and said it. So let's talk about the draft. It's less than a month away. The Suns only have one very, very late pick, but they had an interesting name on their radar, reportedly, coming in for a workout. We'll talk about who that is and kind of what it tells us about how the Suns might be approaching this stuff as they enter a new sort of iteration of building this team. We'll do that after a quick word from Bird Dogs, our new favorite, really all sorts of gear here at the Locked On Podcast Network, especially anyone in Phoenix. The breathability, the stretchiness, the comfort, the softness, all things that you absolutely need this time of year in Phoenix, unless you want to be miserable. Bird Dogs has it in each and every pair of shorts, pants, workout shorts, compression pants. They have everything. If you're a golfer, they make tons of stuff on their golf line, and they give you the freedom. They give you the comfort to walk out, look good, look comfortable, not looking like, okay, I'm forcing myself into something that I don't like, which, for better or worse, very noticeable. They sent us packs. I have a normal pair. I have a workout pair. They've both been awesome. They have an underliner that can substitute as underwear, or it can be an extra layer for you, whatever you like. Order it. You will not regret it. Tons of colors, tons of makes and models and all the different stuff. Golf, workout, casual, nice looking, everything. Go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNBA, and when you enter that promo code LockedOnNBA, you will get a free custom Bird Dogs Yeti-style tumbler with every order. That's birddogs.com/LockedOnNBA. All right, closing out the show here. Let's talk about the draft for just a few minutes here, Aaron. Not that you or I have been scouting Eastern Michigan University this season, but Emoni Bates is a name that people know. He is the guy who was at Memphis and was thought to be the next Kevin Durant once upon a time. You probably remember his name coming out of high school. He was recruited by Penny Hardaway, had a up and down year for Memphis, eventually decommitted, left the school, transferred to Eastern Michigan, had a weapons charge that came and went at one point. I think it got reduced down. It was not as serious as it once seemed. That legal situation has been sorted out. He is now declared for the draft, and he represents basically a really big opportunity for a team who trusts its model to bring in somebody like that who has bounced around schools and had this hype and now is in a different spot in his life, but has this obvious talent. We don't need to talk about Bates, although if you have thoughts, you can. I'm more just interested in kind of what you think the Suns should be trying to do in these drafts now, in the era of they've traded all their picks and they either have no pick or the worst pick between theirs and Brooklyn's. Do you feel like players like that are the way that you would expect them to go or that you would want them to go? Or do you feel like there's maybe more in the Miami Heat model of like, let's bring a little bit of a safer assortment of guys in and just see if we can gradually turn them into NBA players?
I mean, I think like a good mix of it because I think more with Monty, like it seemed like a smarter deal, even though Monty would never go for something like that. I think just a foundation, like they have a foundation of vets, which is like usually a problem when you like, and I don't like saying character issues, but when you have like a situation like that, usually the worst thing that can happen is going to a young team that don't have any vets. Like you see that with Memphis, you see that with Charlotte, like, and they're probably going to get Brendon Miller too. Like usually it doesn't work out that well when you like don't have a foundation of like vets and stuff like that. And then you bring like this young dude who kind of might need some guidance. So I think like if anything, if James Jones really trusts the situation, it's probably going to be a young coach, which is kind of scary. But I think having the vets that we do have which is one of those reasons like it would be good to have Chris Paul, even though I kind of don't want it anymore. But yeah, I think that if James Jones really trusts the system that we have in place, not just like the basketball playing system, but just like the vets and the players and how close they are and all that stuff, then yeah, I can see him going for like dudes that can just straight up hoop and just trying to figure out the NBA and being a professional stuff later on.
Agreed. I mean, and with Bates, like for people who maybe haven't checked in, like I personally see the falling out with Memphis and some of the questions around his recruiting and all that stuff way more of what he'll need to figure out coming into the pros than whatever was going on with the legal stuff. Personally, I mean, I don't know a lot about either situation, but I think from what we can measure, it takes a lot to overcome. Doesn't get along with coaches, has a father who's very involved and tries to kind of dictate this and that. They built an entire prep school. There was a really good story about it at The Athletic, his senior year of high school, which was kind of like right in the middle of COVID. They literally built a prep school that may or may not have even had classes that were legitimate and all this different stuff just to go ahead and get him in a situation where, you know, similar to like what Victor Wembanyama is doing overseas, except this was something that did not exist until his dad wanted it to exist. And it became built all the way around him. And it's not a normal environment. And then he goes to Memphis and all this. So I think those types of guys like that's kind of where you need to be looking. But the thing that interests me, bigger picture about that idea, and when I saw that report come through, was James Jones' job is just different now. And it's already going to be kind of the third different way of approaching things that he's had to deal with. One was, and we've seen him do a version of like make the owner happy and be aggressive at all costs thing before. Like there was very much a mandate when he took over for Ryan McDonough of like, make this thing respectable and stop making me embarrassing. Although Robert Sarver didn't realize he was incapable of not being embarrassing. But James Jones was supposed to help him do that, and he did it. Then it was like, all right, we're winning. Keep this going. And then it was like, all right, I don't have to make too many moves. We're going to ride the continuity thing for as long as we can. And then all of a sudden Matt Ishbia comes in and everything else, and it's go get me Kevin Durant and make this thing, the talk of the league. And he did that. But now really the job is like, nail stuff on the margins, find guys who fit, find personalities who mesh, and that's a whole other type of job. And there's only so many GMs in the world who can do all those different things at a really high level. I'm not saying James Jones can, but we just don't know.
Yeah, and a lot of that is hiring the coach. Like, I think that if I think that part of them, and I hope it's not the case, but a lot of them is like hire a vet coach that knows the deal and can handle personalities, and then we can kind of draft however we want. We can like get people that might not be ready for a professional setting yet, but the coach will keep them in mind. Even when Doc was winning, he wasn't exactly doing that. Those Clippers teams were a mess, and the Boston teams like fell apart. But he had KG and he had Paul Pierce, and that kind of kept stuff in order because Rondo was going off the reservation every once in a while. So I think maybe you would still rather have a young coach that can kind of see eye to eye with some of these kids. But at the same time, James Jones, like, he has a lot of spinning plates now because he doesn't have any picks. It's going to be like he's got to figure out where some of this money is going. He's got some contracts expiring. Like, this is the most that he's ever had to do with maybe one of the best teams he's had. Yeah. And it's like still probably like it's probably the most stress he's probably had to be putting a team together, even though he has the pieces you want. Like, foundationally, he has the pieces that you want, but at the same time, it's like, where's this other stuff going to come from? So yeah, I wouldn't want to be James Jones right now.
I don't blame you. I think on the coach note, I think it gets underrated because they have to win a championship, or they have to be somebody who you think can guide your franchise to winning a championship. But I think one of the big weaknesses of Monty as well that just ended up not mattering because, well, you could say it did matter because they ran out of depth so often and guys were just untouched, but I think that's something you would want the coaching staff. You don't have to put everything on a head coach, but are you going to invest in a legitimate, who's the best player development guy that you're able to get? Are you going to go get him? Does Kevin Young have a Rolodex of people that he's always had in mind for whenever he eventually became a head coach that are going to come in and turn, Josh Okogie into something even better, turn Darius Baisley into something even better? Because that's important too. And then from the James Jones side, back to him, it'll help to have finally a G League team again, which Matt Ishbia gave an interview to, coincidentally, Kevin Durant's company, where he said that he wanted to have the G League team in place by this year. They didn't have everything in order in terms of where to play and being approved by the league to have them on the schedule and all that stuff. So it'll probably be next year, but having that on the horizon is really big too. Do you hire a good G League staff? Do you actually invest in that? Whereas the Suns didn't really. They kind of just, the Robert Sarver Suns previously, they just treated it as like some of the people in our front office will go work in Prescott Valley for the fall, and then we'll see them again in the summer when it's time to do the draft. Like, that's not really how the best teams run their G League programs either. So there's help on the way. There's other ways to approach it, but you're right. James Jones is going to have to be incredibly active and really creative because he's got to nail like 3 or 4 Josh Okogies over the next couple years, whether it's the draft or the minimum guys.
Yeah, and it's like with the Warriors, they got stuck in this situation where they were rebuilding and paying a lot of vets at the same time, and that's kind of just a terrible spot to be, especially if those young dudes don't work out. They wasted a pick. They have to trade them, and they're sitting another high pick. Kuminga couldn't get on the floor. Like, I think you also don't want to be stuck in a situation like that where, we don't really have the picks to, like, kind of blow one, but to sort of be stuck in, like, this player development part where you're hoping these guys work out while you have vets at the same time, and you might end up having to pay some of these young dudes if you do really, really believe in them. So, like, that's the weird part that you don't want to get stuck in either.
And even before this part of the Warriors, when, Durant's last season, they had a bunch of really cheap veterans who were not playoff players, Alfonso McKinney and, these types of guys, Jordan Bell, and draft picks and veteran minimum players who all just were doing nothing come playoff time because their supporting cast aged out. David West and Sean Livingston and Andre Iguodala got old, and they didn't have a great way to replace them, and all the guys who stepped up in their place just weren't good enough. And so that had run its course. Even if Durant had stayed, they would have not nearly been as imposing of a threat anymore. And so they took those couple years to get here, and now they're in a different type of situation. So these are all like cautionary tales, and like some of it's just natural. You're going to go through it, but you want to try to mitigate or limit like the risk that you're headed toward by at least putting real thought into who you're bringing in the building, because you don't want to end up with just that whatever, like we'll sign him. Like, you can't, because then you'll be losing and maybe your stars leave, and then you don't have anything. So, you don't want to think too far ahead, but you kind of have to be if you're James Jones. So, interesting to see. We'll see what they do. Could easily trade their pick too and not take anybody in this draft. I think there will be a lot of movement on draft night, and the Suns will be involved with Ayton, with Paul, with everything. Shamet, who knows? But some good thoughts as we head toward that. That'll wrap us up for the week. Hit follow or subscribe. Get Monday's show right here in your feed. Who knows? There may be a head coach in place by the end of the weekend if these meetings go well for Kevin Young and company. We'll be back then. Listen to Locked On Sports Today in the meantime. Get everything you need to close out your week in the sports world. Start next week there as well. That show's available on all podcast platforms, just like this one. And I'll catch you guys on Monday.